She said we were just casual, so I treated our arrangement exactly like that, and it destroyed her more than any relationship drama ever could. I thought I understood what casual meant until I discovered she was using my generosity as a launching pad for something better. For 6 months, I'd been seeing Veronica, this ambitious baker who ran a struggling artisanal business in San Francisco's Mission District. I'm a software developer at a mid-sized tech company, nothing flashy but stable income and good benefits, and I genuinely liked her drive and creativity when we first met at a farmer's market where she was selling her elaborate cupcakes. What started as coffee dates and long walks through Golden Gate Park evolved into something that felt like a real relationship. She had keys to my apartment in the Richmond. We spent most weekends together exploring the city or working on her business plans, and I'd been letting her borrow my reliable Honda Accord whenever her beat-up delivery van was in the shop, which seemed to happen every other week. I thought we had an understanding, maybe not Facebook official but definitely exclusive and moving toward something more serious. I was completely wrong about everything. The first crack in my perception appeared when I noticed she'd been taking my car during my work-from-home days, claiming she needed reliable transportation for supply runs to potential restaurant clients scattered across the Bay Area. I didn't mind helping someone build their dream business. I actually admired her entrepreneurial spirit and wanted to support her success. But something felt increasingly off about her vague and evasive answers when I asked how these important meetings went, and she never seemed to have any concrete progress to show for all these supposed client visits. Then I started noticing social media posts where she'd carefully positioned my Honda in the background of her professional food photography sessions, staging shots that made it appear like she owned this dependable vehicle while building her brand as a successful artisan baker. I initially brushed it off as creative marketing and entrepreneurial resourcefulness until that eye-opening afternoon when I decided to surprise her with lunch at one of these supposedly crucial client meetings. I found my Honda parked outside an upscale coffee shop in Soma's financial district, and through the large windows I could see Veronica laughing intimately with some guy in an expensive tailored suit, her manicured hand resting on his forearm in a way that definitely wasn't professional networking. My car keys were sitting right there on their table between two fancy laptops like some kind of trophy, and she was leaning in close enough to be having a very personal conversation. When I walked in with my heart pounding, she didn't even look embarrassed or caught, just visibly annoyed that I'd interrupted what was obviously a romantic date. She introduced me to Brad as her friend who'd given her a ride, completely erasing our entire 6-month connection with breathtaking casual indifference that made my stomach drop. The guy looked genuinely confused when I mentioned I was there to pick up my car, and Veronica quickly explained that I was just helping her out temporarily with transportation while her business van was being repaired. Outside on the sidewalk, she told me I was being clingy and possessive about a casual arrangement that was never supposed to be serious or exclusive. I was just a convenient placeholder, she explained with brutal honesty, while she explored better options in the tech scene where real money and serious ambition lived. She needed someone who could actually elevate her business and social status, not just provide reliable transportation and emotional support. The final crushing humiliation came when Brad walked out to join us and she kissed him passionately right against my passenger door, using my own property as the romantic backdrop for her very public betrayal. She tossed me the keys with a satisfied, smug smile and told me she'd call when she needed the car again, treating me like her personal rideshare service with occasional benefits. That night, sitting alone in my apartment while she was presumably out with Brad, I realized I'd been unknowingly funding someone else's active dating life while getting treated like unpaid hired help, and something cold and methodically calculating settled deep in my mind as I began planning exactly how casual our arrangement was about to become. The next few weeks became an exercise in strategic intelligence gathering as I began documenting Veronica's behavior patterns and understanding the full scope of her social manipulation. I started paying closer attention to her interactions with our mutual friend group, particularly her relationship with Christina, her longtime best friend who worked as a freelance journalist and had always been genuinely kind to me during group hangouts at local tech meetups and weekend barbecues. Through casual conversations with shared acquaintances in the startup scene, I began learning uncomfortable truths about how Veronica had been portraying our relationship behind my back for months. She'd been actively badmouthing me to anyone who'd listen, describing me as convenient but definitely not boyfriend material, someone who was useful for rides and splitting dinner bills but lacked the ambition and social status she deserved in a real partner. According to people who'd heard her casual cruelty firsthand, I was apparently boring, too focused on stable employment instead of entrepreneurial risk-taking, and completely unable to provide the kind of lifestyle upgrade she was actively seeking. The most infuriating discovery was learning she'd been posting social media content that deliberately made it appear she owned my Honda, using it as a prop in professional photography for her bakery business without ever asking permission or giving credit. She'd taken dozens of carefully staged photos featuring my reliable car loaded with her artisanal products, creating an image of success and independence that was completely fabricated using my resources. During one particularly revealing conversation at a Mission District coffee shop, I overheard her telling a potential business partner that she had reliable transportation for catering deliveries, conveniently omitting that this transportation belonged to someone else entirely. I researched my car's current market value and was surprised to discover it had actually appreciated due to the used car shortage, making it worth considerably more than I'd initially paid 3 years ago when I bought it certified pre-owned from a Honda dealership in Daly City. Through Veronica's constant complaints about her struggling business finances, I began understanding that her artisanal bakery was barely breaking even most months, with expensive organic ingredients and premium packaging eating into already thin profit margins from her small but dedicated customer base. She was essentially living paycheck to paycheck while maintaining an expensive lifestyle funded by borrowing resources from people like me who were too polite to establish clear boundaries. The most interesting revelation came through observing Christina's reactions during group conversations when Veronica would make casual cruel comments about my limitations as a person and potential partner. Christina would visibly wince and try to change the subject, clearly uncomfortable with her best friend's cavalier dismissal of someone she considered a decent person who deserved basic respect and consideration. I realized Christina had been quietly defending me in conversations I wasn't present for, arguing with Veronica about her entitled attitude and exploitative behavior towards someone who'd been nothing but generous and supportive. During a particularly eye-opening evening at a tech networking event in Soma, I watched Christina's genuine discomfort as Veronica loudly complained about my boring predictability while simultaneously bragging about having reliable transportation whenever she needed it for her business ventures. Christina kept shooting me apologetic looks across the room, clearly mortified by her friend's public ingratitude and casual cruelty towards someone who'd been helpful and kind. That's when I began formulating a plan that would address Veronica's entitled behavior while rewarding someone who actually deserved kindness and consideration, setting the stage for a response she'd never see coming. I spent the next 3 weeks conducting thorough market research that would make my colleagues proud, diving deep into luxury car dealerships across the Bay Area to find the perfect replacement vehicle for my strategic plan. After visiting showrooms from San Jose to Marin County, I discovered an identical Honda Accord at a premium dealership in Palo Alto, same year and mileage as mine but in a striking metallic red color that I remembered Christina mentioning she'd always loved during a casual conversation about dream cars 6 months earlier. The timing was perfect because the used car market had created unusual opportunities for anyone willing to do their homework and move quickly on the right deals. I established relationships with both the selling dealership where I'd trade my current Honda and the buying dealership in Palo Alto, carefully negotiating timing and logistics to ensure I could execute both transactions within a single business day to maximize the shock value of my planned revelation. The financial math worked beautifully in my favor since my well-maintained Honda had actually appreciated in value, and the red one I wanted was priced fairly due to minor cosmetic issues that could be easily resolved with professional detailing. During seemingly casual conversations at coffee shops and group dinners, I began learning more about Christina's current transportation struggles since her bicycle had been stolen from outside her apartment building 3 weeks earlier, leaving her completely dependent on expensive rideshare services for her freelance journalism assignments across the city. She'd mentioned during a particularly stressful week that she was spending nearly $400 monthly on Uber and Lyft rides to interviews and meetings, a significant expense that was seriously impacting her ability to save money or invest in better equipment for her growing freelance career. I also discovered that Christina had been quietly building an impressive portfolio of technology journalism, contributing to several respected online publications and developing sources throughout Silicon Valley that could potentially benefit my own professional network. Her work ethic and genuine curiosity about innovation reminded me why I'd always enjoyed our conversations during group gatherings, and I realized she possessed exactly the kind of integrity and ambition that Veronica only pretended to have while actually exploiting others. I began building a closer friendship with Christina through completely legitimate shared interests, attending the same technology meetups in Soma and discussing industry trends over coffee without any ulterior motives beyond enjoying intelligent conversation with someone who appreciated learning and personal growth. These interactions confirmed my growing suspicion that she was everything Veronica claimed to be but actually wasn't, someone who worked hard for her success instead of manipulating others to provide it. I researched the legal and logistical requirements for gifting a vehicle in California, ensuring I understood title transfers, registration processes, and tax implications to avoid any complications that might undermine my plan's effectiveness. The most satisfying aspect of my preparation was realizing that my software development skills had taught me to think systematically about complex problems and execute solutions with precision, something Veronica had always dismissed as boring predictability but which was about to serve me extremely well. I also began documenting my car's maintenance history and gathering all necessary paperwork to ensure the sale would proceed smoothly when I was ready to execute the final phase of my plan. By the end of 3 weeks, I had every detail mapped out with the kind of thorough preparation that had made me successful in my career, and I was simply waiting for the right moment to demonstrate exactly how casual our arrangement could become. The perfect opportunity arrived on a Thursday night when Veronica texted me asking to borrow my car for another mysterious client meeting the following morning, completely oblivious to the fact that I'd seen her making out with Brad in my passenger seat just 48 hours earlier during what she'd claimed was a professional networking event in the financial district. I calmly agreed to let her pick up the keys, knowing it would be the absolute last time she'd ever have access to my resources or generosity. After she collected my Honda around 9 that evening with her usual entitled attitude and zero gratitude, I waited exactly 2 hours to ensure she'd driven far enough away before executing the most satisfying plan I'd ever conceived in my methodical software developer mind. I drove straight to the 24-hour luxury dealership in Daly City where I'd prearranged everything with a sales manager who specialized in quick turnaround transactions for tech professionals who needed flexibility with their schedules and appreciated efficient service without unnecessary drama. The paperwork took less than 90 minutes since I'd already completed the preliminary credit checks and vehicle inspections, and by midnight I was walking away with a cashier's check for considerably more than I'd originally paid for my Honda 3 years earlier. The used car market had worked completely in my favor, turning my reliable transportation into an unexpected profit that felt like cosmic justice for all the money I'd wasted enabling Veronica's fake lifestyle and ungrateful exploitation of my kindness. From there, I drove my rental car straight to the Palo Alto dealership where the gorgeous metallic red Honda Accord was waiting for me under bright showroom lights, detailed to perfection and ready for immediate pickup with all the upgraded features I'd specifically requested. By 4 in the morning, I was driving through empty Silicon Valley streets in Christina's future car, feeling more satisfied than I'd felt in months as I contemplated how perfectly this was about to unfold. I arrived at Christina's apartment building in the Mission just as the sun was beginning to rise over the Bay Area, carrying fresh coffee from her favorite local roastery and a bag of pastries from the artisanal bakery she'd mentioned loving during one of our technology meetup conversations. When she answered her door in pajamas and obvious confusion about why I was visiting so early, I simply handed her the red Honda's keys and explained that I'd been fortunate enough to complete a lucrative freelance project that allowed me to help a friend who deserved reliable transportation more than anyone I knew. Christina was completely overwhelmed and initially refused to accept such an expensive gift, insisting that I couldn't possibly give away a car to someone I'd only known through group social events and casual conversations about journalism and technology trends. I explained that it wasn't charity but rather a gesture between friends, and that I was genuinely in a financial position to help someone whose work ethic and integrity I'd come to respect enormously over the past several months of getting to know her better through our shared professional interests. The conversation took nearly an hour as I convinced her that accepting the car would actually help me feel better about recent relationship disappointments, and that watching someone deserving benefit from my good fortune was exactly the kind of positive energy I needed in my life right now. I asked her to keep the gift quiet for just a few days while I sorted out some personal matters, knowing that word would eventually reach Veronica through their interconnected social circle in the most devastatingly perfect timing possible. Christina finally agreed after I explained the freelance project story in convincing detail and assured her multiple times that this gesture wouldn't create any awkward obligations or expectations between us as friends. As I walked back to my rental car, watching Christina admiringly inspect her beautiful new vehicle in the early morning sunlight, I felt the deep satisfaction of knowing I'd just executed the most elegant revenge possible while simultaneously helping someone who actually deserved kindness and consideration rather than exploitation and manipulation. The fallout began exactly 48 hours later when Veronica started sending increasingly frantic text messages demanding to know where I was and why I wasn't answering her calls about returning my Honda after her supposed client meeting had ended 2 days earlier. Her initial messages were filled with typical entitled anger about me supposedly stealing my own car back and ruining her important business schedule, but I could detect growing panic underneath her outrage as she began to realize the serious implications of losing her reliable transportation access for future networking events and client visits across the Bay Area. I deliberately waited until Friday afternoon to respond with a simple message explaining that I'd sold the car and was no longer able to provide transportation assistance for her business ventures, watching my phone explode with confused and increasingly desperate responses as reality began to sink in. By Saturday morning, she was calling nonstop and leaving voicemails that escalated from indignant demands for explanations to barely contained hysteria about how I was sabotaging her entrepreneurial success and professional relationships with my sudden selfishness. The perfect climax arrived when she decided to confront me in person, arriving at my apartment building around noon in an obvious rage that was about to transform into something much more devastating for her ego and public image. I was returning from grocery shopping when I spotted her pacing angrily in the parking lot, clearly having waited for my arrival so she could unleash whatever dramatic scene she'd been planning during her sleepless night of realizing how much she depended on my generosity. But before she could even approach me, Christina pulled up in the stunning metallic red Honda that was clearly identical to my old car except for the gorgeous color and upgraded features that made it obviously more expensive and desirable. I watched Veronica's face transform from angry confusion to shocked recognition as she realized she was looking at what appeared to be my Honda, but in the exact red shade she'd mentioned wanting countless times during our 6 months together when she thought we had a future worth planning. The confrontation that followed became an absolute spectacle as Veronica demanded explanations from both Christina and me while other residents gathered on their balconies to watch the drama unfold in our normally quiet apartment complex. Christina initially appeared confused about why her best friend was screaming about car theft and betrayal, but as the situation developed she began to understand that Veronica had been exploiting my kindness while simultaneously badmouthing me to anyone who would listen. I calmly explained to both women that I'd sold my Honda and purchased Christina a gift because I wanted to help someone who actually appreciated kindness rather than someone who treated generosity as an entitlement they could exploit without gratitude or respect. Veronica oscillated wildly between rage at losing her free transportation service and humiliation at being publicly replaced by her own best friend in such a visible and permanent way that everyone in our social circle would eventually witness. The most satisfying moment came when Christina, finally understanding the full scope of how Veronica had been using and dismissing me, firmly refused to return the car despite her friend's increasingly desperate pleas and threats about their friendship being over forever if she didn't immediately give back what Veronica considered rightfully hers through some twisted logic of social proximity and assumed loyalty. Word spread through our interconnected tech and creative communities with the viral speed that only perfectly executed social justice can achieve, as mutual friends began sharing the story of Veronica's entitled exploitation and my elegantly calculated response at coffee shops, networking events, and weekend gatherings across San Francisco. The narrative was impossible for her to control because too many people had witnessed her casual cruelty toward me firsthand, combined with her obvious shock and humiliation when she discovered I'd given her dream car to someone who actually deserved it instead of continuing to enable her manipulative behavior. Veronica attempted desperate damage control by claiming I was obsessed with her and trying to buy Christina's friendship through expensive gifts, but the overwhelming evidence of her months-long exploitation made these accusations sound pathetic rather than convincing to anyone who knew the real story. Most of our mutual friends sided with me after learning the complete details about how she'd been using my car for dates with other men while publicly describing me as convenient but not relationship material, and her reputation for entitled manipulation became the subject of cautionary tales shared throughout the startup scene where professional relationships and personal integrity actually mattered for long-term success. Christina and I spent considerable time together during the following weeks as she helped me navigate the social aftermath while processing her own sense of betrayal by someone she trusted and defended for years despite mounting evidence of toxic behavior. Our friendship deepened naturally as we discovered shared values about treating people with respect and appreciation rather than viewing them as resources to be exploited for personal gain, and I found myself genuinely enjoying conversations with someone who possessed both intelligence and emotional maturity. The incident became legendary within our overlapping social circles as a perfect example of proportional revenge executed with class and strategic thinking, demonstrating how someone could address manipulation and disrespect without resorting to drama or petty vindictiveness that would reflect poorly on their own character. Veronica's artisanal bakery business began suffering almost immediately as word spread about her character and treatment of people who had tried to support her entrepreneurial dreams, with several potential clients and business partners quietly distancing themselves from someone whose personal conduct suggested serious problems with professional reliability and ethical behavior. Meanwhile, Christina's freelance journalism career experienced an unexpected boost from improved mobility that allowed her to accept assignments across the Bay Area, combined with networking opportunities through my tech industry contacts who appreciated her insightful writing about innovation and business trends. The beautiful red Honda became a daily reminder throughout Silicon Valley of what happened when someone took advantage of genuine kindness, while also serving as proof that good people could recognize and reward integrity when they encountered it in their personal and professional relationships. Within 2 months, Veronica had become a cautionary tale whispered about at industry events as an example of how entitled behavior and manipulation inevitably backfired when directed toward people who valued themselves enough to establish healthy boundaries and demand basic respect in their relationships. 6 months after the parking lot confrontation that ended Veronica's exploitation of my generosity, I found myself reflecting on how completely my life had transformed through one calculated decision to stop enabling someone who viewed kindness as weakness to be exploited rather than appreciated. Christina and I had developed a genuine romantic relationship built on mutual respect, shared values, and the kind of emotional maturity that made every day feel like a positive investment in our future together rather than a draining experience that left me questioning my own worth. Our connection grew naturally from friendship into something deeper as we discovered how refreshing it felt to be with someone who contributed equally to both practical responsibilities and emotional support, creating the kind of partnership I'd always hoped to find but had never experienced during my months of being taken for granted by Veronica. The red Honda had become a symbol of our relationship's foundation, representing how treating people well creates positive cycles that benefit everyone involved, and Christina insisted on making monthly payments toward the car despite my repeated protests that it was a gift meant to be enjoyed without financial obligation. Her integrity about contributing fairly to our shared expenses stood in stark contrast to Veronica's entitled assumption that my resources existed for her benefit, and I realized how much healthier it felt to be with someone who appreciated generosity rather than demanding it as an unquestioned right. Meanwhile, Veronica's situation had deteriorated significantly as the consequences of her manipulative behavior continued to compound throughout the Bay Area's interconnected professional and social networks where reputation mattered enormously for career advancement and business opportunities. According to mutual friends who occasionally provided updates I never requested, she'd moved to Portland after her artisanal bakery business collapsed and her reputation became too toxic to rebuild in San Francisco's competitive entrepreneurial ecosystem where trust and reliability were essential for sustainable success. Her pattern of using others had ultimately left her isolated from the support networks she'd spent years exploiting, and she'd apparently struggled to find new relationships once potential partners learned about her history of treating generous people as disposable resources rather than valued human beings deserving basic respect and consideration. The most satisfying aspect of my revenge wasn't her obvious suffering, but rather how it had connected me with Christina and taught me to recognize the difference between someone who appreciated my care and someone who simply took advantage of my willingness to help others achieve their goals without expecting anything meaningful in return. Christina's freelance journalism career had flourished with improved mobility and networking opportunities, leading to a staff position at a respected technology publication where her insightful analysis of industry trends had attracted attention from editors who valued thoughtful reporting over sensationalized coverage. Our relationship had become proof that choosing to invest energy in people who reciprocated kindness rather than exploited it could create the kind of happiness and stability that made all the previous disappointment feel like necessary preparation for recognizing genuine compatibility when it finally appeared. The red Honda continued to turn heads wherever we drove it around the Bay Area, serving as a daily reminder that standing up for yourself didn't require dramatic confrontation or bitter revenge, but simply choosing to direct your generosity toward people who deserved it rather than continuing to enable those who viewed your kindness as an entitlement they could exploit indefinitely without gratitude or respect.